take this, so you run down to the safety of the town. But the panic on the streets of Carlisle, Dublin, Dundee, Humberside, I wonder to myself. Burn down the disco, hang the blessed DJ, because the music that they constantly play, it says nothing to me about my life.
Okay, that was the Smiths, my favourite band from the 1980s. Now, the theme of this video is why aren't there any great bands around today? And you know, the first thing I'd do is just ask you to think about what made the Smiths such a great band. I mean, what made the Smiths great was, first of all, the fact that everyone in the band was a brilliant musician. You know, apart from Morrissey, who was a brilliant singer and lyricist, but everyone in the band was a brilliant musician, and everyone did their bit really well. Obviously Johnny Marr's guitars, but also things like Andy Rourke's bass lines on tracks like Barbarism Begins at Home. And you know, the Smiths were edgy, they were radical on albums like Meat Is Murder and The Queen Is Dead, of course. And they broke new ground. No one had really written lyrics like Morrissey's before, you know, dealing with you know, the minutiae of sort of personal difficulties and loneliness and so on. And no one had made music like the Smiths, the band. You know, the guitar styles was completely original. You know, it wasn't, you know, just jingly jangly copying the Byrds. It was different. It was more multi-layered, and the music was original as well as the lyrics. And you know, across a string of classic albums, you know, like The Queen Is Dead and Hatful of Hollow, this one, of course, which is a classic. You know, the Smiths songs, you know, really spoke to a generation, and they were original, they were edgy, and they were radical. In short, that what made the Smiths great was everything that is lacking in the music scene today, as far as I can see, anyway. I mean, you just have to ask yourself the question, when was there really last a really great British band that broke new ground and did something original? I think you'd have to go back to the 1990s for that. I mean, the last, you know, great music scene with bands like that I can remember was Britpop in the mid-90s. Bands like Blur and Oasis and Pulp. And after that, you know, you seem to have, or popular culture, music culture, seems to have entered a wasteland where there is very little at all, apart from, you know, obviously the Simon Cowell rubbish, which seems to dominate the charts today, and a series of really bland groups, bland indie bands like, you know, the Kaiser Chiefs and Keane and this sort of thing. You know, where every song seems to sound, you know, just totally kind of middle of the road, as if it's, you know, pitched at 50-somethings or 20-somethings who think of themselves like 50-somethings. I don't know who it's pitched at, but it's not got the kind of radical originality of bands like the Smiths, the Housemartins, the Stone Roses, and those sorts of bands from back in the day. And you know, you have to ask yourself, well, what's missing then? What is it that those bands had back then that the music scene today doesn't have? You know, what is it that's missing at the heart of it? Well, one of the first things that seems to be missing from the music scene today is any kind of sense that music today is part of any kind of scene or countercultural scene. That seems to have gone out of the window. So, you know, even at these big festivals like Glastonbury, you get these current bands, but they're rubbing shoulders with kind of really dreary acts, you know, that nobody would have bothered listening to back in my day. You know, You know, Shirley Bassey and the like attends and stars at Glastonbury now, and Tom Jones and people like this, who were old hat even in the 1980s. And, you know, everything seems to be kind of much of a muchness. And then if you add into the mix all the kind of Simon Cowell rubbish and X Factor rubbish, I mean, it just seems that there is no sense of any scene or counterculture element to music today. The last big music scene I can remember is the Britpop thing, and before that the grunge thing in the early 90s. And after kind of grunge and Britpop, you know, that kind of thing seemed to go out of the window completely. The second thing that seems to be the case today is that the kind of Simon Cowell talent contest type music stuff just utterly dominates. To the exclusion of virtually everything else, apart from, you know, these one or two bland indie groups. So, you know, the charts, certainly, you know, the album charts, let alone the single charts, are dominated by this kind of post-take that boy band, girl band kind of stuff. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with some of that stuff. I mean, you know, there's always been these kind of boy band kind of groups that appeal to teenage girls, you know, 14-year-old girls, you know, and, you know, your One Direction kind of stuff. And there is a room for the likes of One Direction. But it's when, you know, older people listen to that kind of stuff and seem to think it's cool in some way. I mean, you know, it's when your 25-year-old listens to sort of boy bands and things that you have to ask yourself what the hell is going on. Have we bred a generation of complete idiots or what? You know, it's as if today, you know, people don't seem to progress out of that kind of stuff. You know, and X Factor, I mean, the idea that crooning somebody else's songs in a karaoke way, you know, old songs, or you know, just rubbish that Simon Cowell's team of writers have written is in any way cool is ridiculous. You know, have you not heard of the idea of actually writing your own material and actually playing on your own records? You know, what you know, it seems to be called groups today in this kind of X Factor world aren't groups, they're collections of singers. You know, they're 4 or 5 people who sing. The music is made by some kind of machine. I mean, it seems that this kind of stuff kind of has evolved out of the old Stock Aitken and Waterman thing that was around in the late 80s. You know, your Kylie and Jason rubbish. I mean, we had all that in the late 1980s, but the whole point was that it was a small section of the market, and then there was loads of other stuff going on at the same time. So you still had, you know, bands like the Smiths and so on competing with it. Whereas now, you know, your X Factor stuff, which has evolved out of the old Stock Aitken and Waterman type factory music schmuck, that kind of stuff now just dominates everything, to the exclusion of everything else. I mean, why? Is it because you know, younger people today don't have any critical capacity? You know, they don't understand, you know, the difference between a Simon Cowell song crooned by a boy band, you know, and a great piece of music written by a singer-songwriter. I mean, is it that they just don't understand the difference because they have no critical sense? I don't know. Now, obviously, there will be people watching this video who will say, well, there's loads of great stuff around today. There's this band, there's that band, there's the other band. Well, it just seems to me that most of it, even if it is around on the internet. You know, it's accessed on the internet, it's downloaded from the band's own websites or YouTube or whatnot. And what has changed, the big thing that has changed with the music scene today is what's happened to the mainstream. It's the mainstream where all this kind of blandy rubbish has just been allowed to dominate, and to the exclusion of anything edgy, anything interesting, anything intelligent, in short, everything the Smiths were. It's been completely edged out, pushed out of the mainstream, and this kind of waves of rubbish piled up on rubbish just dominates the mainstream of music. I mean, you only have to listen to Radio 1. If they're not playing kind of dush dance music dross, they're just playing this kind of bland chart pop music written by teams of specialist writers employed by Simon Cowell, crooned by umpteen female artists who all look and sound exactly the same, and blandy male artists epitomised. You know, if there's one artist that epitomises the music scene today, it's probably Ollie Murs. Smiley Ollie Murs. Big, nice, big beaming smile on his face. Nothing whatsoever between his ears in terms of brains. Crooning this drossy music written by Simon Cowell's writers. He epitomises music today. And as well as Ollie Murs, then you have, you know, bland bands like the Kaiser Chiefs who epitomise so-called indie music, i.e. stuff that's bland enough to appeal to the most boring of people to maximise sales, while at the same time, you know, putting itself forward as being independent in some way, which of course it isn't. You know, it's like Coldplay as well. You know, once Coldplay seemed to have been the start of this kind of move amongst so-called indie groups towards complete and utter asinine blandness, and you know, it's continued to this very day. So you know, if you think about what made the, you know, popular music great in the past and the mainstream of popular music great in the past, all of that seems to have gone from the mainstream, and if it exists, it exists on the internet to fringe markets, and that's where it kind of survives. It certainly seems to be where most rock music now exists, just on the fringes. And you know, the question is, will it be turned around? You know, can the music business in Britain or indeed in America ever become really interesting again? Well, I've no idea, but I don't see any signs of it, and that's why kids today seem to be just like magpies, picking bits from their parents' music collections to listen to, because there's nothing but utter rubbish around today, for, you know, that's, you know, pitched at them. I mean, there are kind of good people around. There are a few good people around in the charts, you know, people like Paolo Nutini and Jake Bugg. But they're very much the exception that proves the rule, and often their style is still very derivative. I mean, you know, I've heard Jake Bugg and he's very good, but he does sound like he's trying to copy Donovan or something from 1965. I don't get a sense of real originality in many of these artists. So at the end of the day, I mean, I lost interest in the popular music scene around the year 2000. I'd much rather sit and listen to the Smiths than listen to anything, I think, in the charts today, which is a shame, but there you go. Anyway, thanks for listening.
I was happy in the haze of a drunken hour, but heaven knows I'm miserable now. I was looking for a job and then I found a job.